I'm Nitin Sridhar. I'm currently Chief Curator of Advaita Vedanta, which is involved for the last 10 years in dissemination of Advaita Vedanta across the world. And I come from a civil engineering background professionally, and I worked in construction field like SR projects and BL Kashyap, etc. Before 2015. I changed my profession from civil engineering to uh, internet journalism and research such work in 2015. I have worked as a staff writer for Newsgram. Since 2016, I worked as editor of India Facts, a very popular online website that published on Indian history and culture. And currently, I'm not only managing Advaita Academy, but I am also consulting editor to Indic Today magazine. And I have published 5 books and mostly on topics related to Sanatan Dharma. And the most academically and even otherwise acclaimed book was Menstruation Across Cultures, a Historical Perspective, which examines menstruation notions and practices across the world in different cultures and religions. My last book was on Samanya Dharma, basically a reader, a short, which provides a short overview of the tenets of Samanya Dharma across Indian Hindu Shastras. And my upcoming book, which will be published hopefully in January, is a English commentary on Ishavasya Upanishad, one of the most important Upanishad. Today's topic is place of Manu and other Smritis in Hindu tradition. Shastras play a very central role in Hindu society. However, currently we are in such a position that we have come to it is a modern fad, so to speak, a effect of colonialism, that we say that anything goes in Hinduism. There is no central authority. Yes, of course, we do not have a central authority like the Abrahamics, but to try to understand Hinduism or a Hindu Dharma, so with from a framework or by comparison to Abrahamic religions itself is the first folly we do, because then our approach to Hindu Dharma will always be negative, because in the mind we believe that whatever is opposite to what is in the Abrahamic religions is Hindu Dharma. So that approach is problematic, and as a result of all these issues, we have completely become alienated from our own intellectual tradition, from our own Shastric traditions, and hence we do not even understand the very fundamental question of what is a Shastra and what is the role and function of Shastra. It is this ignorance and misconception which is routinely used, routinely exploited by the detractors of Hinduism, who use texts like Manu and other Smritis to make claims or to cherry pick verses and attack the whole of Sanatan Dharma, and uh, using various claims. For example, Manusmriti is often held as a as a text, as a evidence that Hindu Dharma is anti-women, and it often a particular verse which supposedly says that women do not have right to be independent is claimed as evidence for this. This is just an example. We have many such claims, many such narratives that is created. But what is more disturbing to me, at least personally, the than the disturbing than this kind of narrative that is created against us, is the kind of response that the Hindus are giving to such narrative, and that response is completely problematic. This response is one of confusion, one of is clumsy in nature, and it betrays a great ignorance about our tradition at all. For example, the kind of claims that we make as a response is that Manu and other texts in the Smriti genre, in the genre of Dharma Shastras, they are very only based on time and place, and hence are outdated today and no longer relevant. And then the another claim is Smritis are not central to Hinduism. They have never been. It is only the Veda and Bhagavad Gita which are central to Hinduism. So what Smriti says do not matter. And funnily, as evidence, what they point out is that the prevalence of Bhagavad Gita in people's home, a copy of Bhagavad Gita and not Manusmriti. In fact, a Twitter poll was conducted by one Hindu intellectual some time back. And the result of the poll was most people have Bhagavad Gita at their homes, a copy of Bhagavad Gita, but 99% people do not have a Manusmriti at home. This very pole, the very basic conceptual, the very basic expectation that judges the role or function of a Shastra based on how many homes have a copy itself is problematic. And I will show why it is problematic, why it betrays ignorance. Even unfortunately, even a great saint, a great yogi, and a great monk like Swami Vivekananda, I came across a quote by him, and I have not verified it, but it was shared to me with a friend, I believe, and wherein Swami Vivekananda says that Smritis and other texts were created by people with limited intellect. I think I find that completely misleading, to be honest. I say I respect Swami Vivekananda. I have been influenced and inspired by him. But this, on this account, at least, of course, the overall the point he is trying to make is the he wants to uphold the authority of Veda. That is okay. That is correct. But this particular comment was is incorrect. I have to point out. And this and another claim, another response is that all problematic assertions in the Smritis are later day interpolations done by some wily Brahmanas who deserve choicest of abuses, and hence these texts are not worth considering. I have literally heard these arguments. I have heard some activists from our side abusing the authors of these Smritis with choicest of abuses. And then, of course, a related argument is that Manu was never held in high esteem, nor was this text ever important. It was the British which manufactured, which brought Manu into a central stage, and the funny thing is, they argue that British actually interpolated the text of Manusmriti with lot of distortions and colonial agenda. This is something simply impossible. There are so many traditional commentaries which predate the British by 1,000 years, So these kind of very highly uninformed assertions are what we have as Hindu response. The the situation is so bad that today there are concerted attempts to sanitize and purify our text by removing all such so-called interpolations by the Brahmins and the British and etc. You know, a few years back, a book titled Vishuddha Manusmriti was brought out, which was basically a sanitization project, as I call it, wherein they said 60% of the verses in 2,685 verses of Manusmriti are interpolations, and the basis of such assertions is whatever you find inconvenient, you just brand it as interpolation. One clarification I need to make is we need to understand that we need to approach the Shastras. Our first basis of our approach or the motive of our approach should be to understand what they say first. Whether we accept it, what we accept it, how we accept it, or what we reject will all come at a later stage. But without properly understanding it, understanding the role of Shastra, understanding what they are saying, everything else will not matter. Everything else will remain merely a prejudiced opinion. So With this in mind, I want to focus today's talk on the fundamental question: what is the place of Dharma Shastra in Hindu tradition? What is the role? What is the place? What is the function? How we should understand the existence of Shastra? Why they are existing and what is the purpose? If sab kuch chalta hai, I mean that is the attitude of a common Hindu, sab kuch chalta hai, then why do we need Shastras at all, right? The fundamental question is all this, the first thing first, all these smritis like Manu Smriti, Yagyavalkya Smriti, and Parashara Smriti, Narada Smriti, we have some 18 to 20 important smritis. They are all called as Dharma Shastra. And so we need to understand what is Dharma Shastra, the definition of Dharma Shastra. Dharma Shastra has two words. One is Dharma, second part is Shastra. So what is Dharma? Dharma is one of the most complicated word term in Sanskrit language. No English language can capture the dimensions of it in full. It can mean ethics, morality, law, justice, duty, righteousness, so many things depending upon context and of its usage. However, my focus is on what it means in an individual context, and that is what is most important. In individual context, it refers to duties and the righteousness of actions or the ethical aspect. Ethical aspect is one aspect. The duties or what we call as swadharma is the another aspect. To understand them, we have to understand the very term dharma. Dharma literally it comes from the dhru dhatu and it means that which upholds, that which sustains. And we have from the Upanishads like Mahara Narayana Upanishads, etc., which says, Dharmo Vishwasya Jagataha Pratishta, Dharma is that which upholds the universe, so on and so forth. But what does this upholding actually mean, especially in an individual context? What does it mean that Dharma upholds me or you? So, a more explicit definition is found in Vaisheshika Sutra, which says that which yields or those actions which yields abhyudaya and nishreyasa is dharma. And now these two terms are very significant. And whenever we are confused on issues, this is the definition we have to return to, especially regarding how we should live our life, how we should act, and so on and so forth. Abhyudaya means well-being in a material sense. Nishreyasa means well-being in a spiritual sense. If we speak in the terms of Purusharthas, Artha and Kama comes under Abhyudaya, Dharma and Moksha comes under Nishreyasa. So in the context of an individual, simply put, all those actions which lead one to overall well-being is Dharma. Spiritual, material, ethical, every kind of well-being, that is Dharma. And the opposite of it, those actions which lead us to fall, lead us to bondage, which lead us to more suffering, is adharma. So this is the very primary basic definition of dharma. The ultimate goal of life is sukha, happiness. Everybody wants happiness. So dharma has the capacity to give happiness in a true sense, and the opposite of dharma, adharma, gives dukkha or sorrow in it is the source of all the sorrow. Today we are suffering from sorrow. It is related to adharma associated with our past actions, right? I will not go detail into what dharma is. Anybody interested can read my book, Samanya Dharma. It is a very small book of some 100, 120 pages or something, and it is available on Amazon everywhere. It's a small book, you can read it in 3 hours, and it's basically a kind of introduction to what is Dharma, right? Now, the second part of the term Dharma Shastra is Shastra, and this is the main focus, main point I want to focus. Shastra has multiple meanings. I have just copy pasted these meanings from a standard dictionary. Shastra can mean an order, a command, a precept, a rule. Shastra can refer to a teaching, an instruction, a direction, advice, good counsel, and it can refer to any instrument of teaching, any manual or compendium of rules, any book or treatises. It may be religious treatise, it may be scientific treatise. Simply put, Shastra is a treatise. It is a work. It is a work. It is a body of teaching. It could be a scientific teaching or related to science, like we have Bhautika Shastra, which is physics, Jiva Shastra, biology, Rasayana Shastra, I think it's chemistry, or it could be something like Artha Shastra, you know, the science of politics and economics, or it could be Dharma Shastra. So Shastra basically is a body of work which imparts knowledge about that field of study through, and how does it impart this knowledge? It impart it in the form of words and sentences. I mean, you can in a more conventional transactional sense, we can call it a textbook, right? uh, the physics students familiar with Resnick and Halliday. They're very famous foreign authors whose textbooks are especially studied by those who are preparing for IITs and such competitive exams. Resnick and Halliday or H.C. Verma. These are all physics textbooks, right? These are all name of the authors, anyways. So, similarly, Shastra is that a treatise which gives us knowledge about a particular subject. Now, in Hindu tradition, there are many kinds of vidyas and there are many kinds of kalas. In one place, it says there are 14 vidyas, Chaturvida Vidyasthanas, and 64 kalas. In Mahabharata, it gives a list of 18 vidyas. The, the traditional Chaturvida, that is 14 vidyas, plus it adds another 4 vidyas. And what is this Mahabharata verse say? It says, Angani Vedaschattvaro Mimamsa Nyaya Vistaraha Puranam Dharmashastram Cha Vidya Hi Hetash Chaturdashaha Ayurvedo Dhanurvedo Gandharvascheti Te Trayaha Arthashastra Chaturtham Tu Vidya Ashtadasheva Tu. Basically, 18 Vidyas are the 4 Vedas, the 6 Vedangas. The 6 Vedangas are Shiksha, Chandas, Kalpa, Jyotisha, Vyakarana, and Nirukta. They are Vedanga, the limbs of Veda, in the sense, without a thorough knowledge of these 6 branches, you cannot understand the full import of Veda. Chandas about pronunciation, phonetics, the Shiksha is phonetics, and Chandas about Chanda. Kalpa is about rituals, and Dharma Sutras also comes under Kalpa. Jyotisha is about astronomy. Vyakarana is grammar. Nirukta is etymology, so on and so forth. And then it mentions Mimamsa. It's a branch of investigation into the meaning of the Veda. Nyaya is the branch of logic and epistemology. Dharma Shastra, here we find a mention of Dharma Shastra as well. And we have Puranas, Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharvaveda, and Artha Shastra. Gandharvaveda relates to music, dance, and such arts. Dhanurveda is about all martial skills, so on and so forth. So Dharma Shastra is one of the Vidyasthanas, 18 Vidyasthanas. Simply stated, Dharma Shastra refers to any treatise which imparts knowledge about Dharma. It tells us what actions are Dharma and hence beneficial to us, hence imparts Nishrayasa and Abhyudaya to us, and what actions are Adharma and hence are not beneficial and hence could lead to dukkha and more bondage to this samsara. So basically, they tell us what actions leads to happiness, what actions leads to punyam. This is an important concept related to dharma. See, it is very easy to see that if I study for an exam, I will pass the exam. If I don't study for the exam, I will fail the exam. And that is karma and karma phala. But there is another aspect to it. People can say that I can copy in the exam and then pass. What about that? Right? Here comes the notion of papa and punya. If you pass the exam in a ethical manner, you not only are passing the exam by hard work, but you are also gaining what is called as punya or karmic merit. This is what is dharma is, which gives sukha to you in future. If you pass the exam by cheating, cheating is adharma. So though you may pass the exam, you are also accruing papam, which is dharmic or karmic demerit. And the phala of this in the form of dukkha, you will have to face in future. So Dharma Shastra is basically a treatise which reveals about what is dharma and what is adharma. See, what dharma and adharma do not come and on their own and say that actions will not come to us on their own and say that, see, look, I give you sukha, I give you dukkha, right? So there must be some basis to understand what is dharma and what is adharma. Otherwise, I can do whatever I want and I can justify myself saying I am doing good. And the person beside me can do whatever he wants. Even a criminal can justify his actions, right? So to fully understand the function of Dharma Shastra in understanding about dharma and adharma, we must first understand the Hindu epistemology or the Hindu theory of knowledge about how knowledge about any object arises. And this is what I find is very important. This comes under the philosophy of the darshanas, but this, because without this tool, without this understanding of theory of knowledge, everything else will not make sense, right? That is why I have decided to focus on this, the theory of knowledge, Hindu theory of knowledge, which is epistemology, right? Epistemology is a vast topic. Basically, epistemology means it is a theory of knowledge. It deals with how the knowledge is generated, how do we understand something, what does it mean to say that I understand this, I perceive this, I know this, right? Or I see this, right? In Hindu Dharma, we have different schools of philosophy. Philosophies may not be a right term to describe them. They're basically six Astika Darshanas. There are, of course, Nastika Darshanas like Bauddha, Jaina, Charvaka, etc. I will not go to them. I will stick to only the Astika Darshanas, the six Hindu Darshanas. And each of these darshanas have their own theories of knowledge, have their own epistemology. Though we will not go deep into the subject because there are a lot of commonalities and differences between them. It's a history of many centuries of debate between these different darshanas on different aspects of epistemology and ontology, etc. But I want to focus on very basic elements that are relevant to our subject. The first thing to note is when it is said that we have acquired knowledge or we have perceived some object, where I have cognized about an object. There are four elements involved in this process. The first is the subject or the knower. That is, I see an elephant. So there is an I, which is the knower, the subject. And this subject is called as pramata. Pramata is one who perceives the cognitions, who is the knower. And then there is the object of knowledge. In the example, I see an elephant. Elephant is the object. And this object of knowledge is called as prameya. And then there is method or the means through which the knowledge is acquired. This is called as pramana. In the sentence, I see an elephant, the see or the seeing is the method, means through which the knowledge about the existence of elephant is acquired. That this means or method or the process through which the knowledge is generated or acquired is pramana. And finally, there is knowledge itself. According to Nyaya Darshana, which is one of the important darshanas, all knowledge are not correct knowledge, right? All cognitions are not correct knowledge. Cognitions could be true cognition, cognitions could be false. For example, in a desert, we see a mirage and think that it is water, but there is no water there. So that is a false cognition, right? So false cognition is called as aprama, whereas true cognition or correct cognition, correct knowledge or knowledge, simply put, valid knowledge is called as prama. So these terms are important. Prama, valid knowledge. Pramana, the method of acquiring knowledge. Pramata is the knower, the subject, and prameya, the object of knowledge. So now, first we have to see what is the definition of knowledge, or what is the definition of true knowledge, that is prama. And different darshanas define prama in different way. Nyaya darshana, for example, defines prama as yathartha anubhava, that is true presentational knowledge which is definite and assured, asandigdha, it says. It is definite, a definite knowledge, not a doubt. So the doubt and confusions, etc., are not considered as prama, not considered as true knowledge. Definitive knowledge and assured knowledge and a presentational knowledge. By presentation knowledge, it simply means that we what is directly perceived, what is directly understood. By this, it excludes the memory from the definition of prama. Vaisheshika Darshana, on the other hand, accepts this definition of Nyaya, but it adds memory as well to this definition. Sankhya Darshana, on the other hand, Sankhya gives a elaborate process of how knowledge arises, how in the reflection of the light of the self, the intellect becomes modified in the form of an object, when the senses go to object. It's a complicated theory. I will not go here beyond the scope. Basically, it defines prama as the reflection of the self in the intellect as modified into the form of the object. In Bhatta Mimamsa, my main focus throughout this talk will be three schools: Nyaya Darshana, Mimamsa Darshana, and Vedanta Darshana. Mimamsa and Vedanta are directly relevant because they both involve in the investigation into Veda. They are called Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa for this reason. Mimamsa by definition means investigation, and Nyaya Darshana because Nyaya Darshana is related to Tarka Shastra. It is a Shastra of logic, and it is relevant. It provides the logical basis for all Vidyas. So in Bhatta Mimamsa, Prama or true knowledge is defined as primary and original knowledge. Anadhigata, that is something new, something original has to be understood. Prabhakara Mimamsa defines Prama as immediate experience, Anubhuti. Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta defines Prama as knowledge that is original as well as uncontradicted by other means. Anadhigata, abhadita, and abhadita or uncontradicted is the key here. Basically, Vedanta says that all knowledge which is not contradicted by other means is correct knowledge, is prama. Mimamsa and Vedanta believe that the knowledge or cognitions are swata pramana. They are pramana, they are true on its own, but that is, they are valid by themselves as long as only the invalidity is dependent upon other factors. The meaning is simply this: as long as a cognition or a knowledge is not contradicted by other pramanas. For example, if an inference using anumana, we will come to this in a while, is not contradicted by direct perception of the pratyaksha, then that anumana is correct. It is prama. It is true knowledge. So as long as the knowledge is not contradicted by other pramanas or other sources, that knowledge is correct. So with this very basic understanding of what is prama, next let us move on to the other important aspect, which is pramana. Pramana can be defined as a unique operative cause of prama or valid knowledge. As I said, prama is the method or the means through which prama is generated or the valid knowledge is understood or generated or acquired. It is a unique operative cause. Why is it unique? It is unique because though for the generation of valid knowledge or prama, all the three, namely pramata, prameya, and pramana, are required. They must be present. However, mere existence of pramata and prameya per se will not lead to valid knowledge. It is the existence of pramana which invariably leads to generation of prama. A prama will always lead to, is always accompanied by generation of prama. And pramana is the immediate antecedent from which knowledge flows. Hence, it is called as operative cause. See, there are, for a knowledge to generate, a lot of different causes are there. The whole, there are general conditions which create a cause to be happen. For example, in the statement, I see an elephant, the elephant has to be there for me to perceive the elephant, right? And I have to be there to perceive the elephant as well. However, these are all general conditions. The exact, the immediate condition, the immediate antecedent is that I am seeing. The seeing, the act of seeing, that is pratyaksha pramana. This pramana is the operative cause. It is the unique cause for prama. So pramana can be understood as a special operating cause that gives rise to prama or valid knowledge as against other general conditions that facilitates the whole process. So now we have a basic definition of prama as valid knowledge. However, you define it based on different darshanas. And then we have the definition of pramana as a special operating cause that gives rise to prama or valid knowledge. Now, in Hindu tradition, different number of pramanas are recognized. Largely, there are 6 that I have mentioned here, and they are the major ones. But there are 2 more ones which I have not mentioned here. The 6 major ones are Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Arthapatya, Anupalabdhi, and Shabda. There are 2 more ones. One is Aitihya. I don't remember the other one. Aitiyas basically are those who Aitihya and the Pauranika. I'm not sure. I don't remember it correctly now. Basically, it is accepted by the Pauranika school, which considers Itihasa and Puranas as a independent source of knowledge on its own. Anyways, the 6 major pramanas are Pratyaksha. Pratyaksha is direct perception. It is the perception, it is the direct objects of the world, empirical knowledge, what it can be said. The knowledge that we perceive with our eyes, with our ears, with our tongue, touch, it is a sensory knowledge. The knowledge which we gain through our senses, that is Pratyaksha. Then is Anumana or inference. For example, I see a smoke on the top of a hill, and then I infer, logically I infer that there must be a fire there. I am not seeing the fire. I cannot see the fire because it is very far. But I am seeing the smoke and I am inferring that there is a fire there. And this inference happens because of the universal vyapti or the relationship between fire and the smoke, that wherever there is fire, there is smoke. So this is called as inference, anumana. And then upamana, which is comparison and analogy. For example, there is some kind of a wild animal. Somebody asks, what is, how can he only knows it by name, whatever that is. And he asks, how can I identify it? I want to go to a forest and I want to identify it. So I say that, look, it looks like a horse, or it looks like a cow, but it has a different color, or it has a hoofs, or it has some particular kind of teeth, or something like that. The point is, I'm comparing it with something else. Comparison. Upamana is basically comparison. Here, the knowledge arises by understanding the similarity between a known object and the unknown object about which we need to gain the knowledge. So the knowledge about the unknown object is gained by understanding the similarity of it with a known object. That is upamana, that is another pramana. Arthapatti is postulation, it is a derivation from circumstances. Basically, what Arthapatti means is this. There is a very common example used in the Shastras, like there is statement Devadatta does not eat in the day. And there is a second proposition which says Devadatta is getting fat. So if he does not eat in the day, but yet he is getting fat, it only implies that he must be eating in the night. So this is called as postulation. We do not directly know whether he is eating in the night or not. We cannot directly infer it as well, but we can postulate it, and this postulation is correct. Because if he is not eating in the day and he is getting fatter, that means he is getting nourished at some time, that must be night then. So this is postulation or arthapatti, and this is another means to attain valid knowledge, prama. And then is anupalabdhi, non-perception. It basically means that, say, in a room, on your work table, you have your laptop. Every day you have the laptop there, and someday, one day, when you come back in the evening, in the afternoon, your wife during cleaning must have removed that laptop from that place, and you enter your room, and when you look at the table, you suddenly realize my laptop is not there. That is non-perception of an object at a place it was usually existing. That non-perception is anupalabdhi. It is considered as a independent pramana. And then we have shabda, or word testimony of reliable people, and I will deal with shabda in a while. Now, not all darshanas accept all these different pramanas as valid. Nyaya Darshana accepts only four pramanas, that is Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, and Shabda, as leading to valid knowledge, as leading to Prama. Vaisheshika accepts only two, Pratyaksha and Anumana, but it also accepts Shabda in the sense that it considers Shabda as being a part of Anumana itself. And then we have Sankhya, which accepts three pramanas, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Shabda. Prabhakara Mimamsa accepts five pramanas, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Arthapatti, and Shabda. Only the Bhatta Mimamsa and Advaita Vedanta accept all the six pramanas. See, some of you might not know what does it mean, Prabhakara Mimamsa and Bhatta Mimamsa. See, Mimamsa is a single school, but there are different divisions. I mean, there are two major branches of this school. One is after Kumarila Bhatta, the Bhatta Mimamsa. The other is Prabhakara, another great Mimamsaka. It is Prabhakara Mimamsa school. So only the Bhatta Mimamsa and Advaita Vedanta accepts all the six pramanas are valid means to gain valid knowledge. What is common, if you just notice, to all these Hindu darshanas, all the six darshanas, including Vaisheshikas, is that irrespective of how they define prama or valid knowledge, and how many number of different pramanas that they accept as valid pramanas, they all accept that Shabda as a valid pramana, and especially they accept Veda as the valid pramana that reveals true knowledge, that gives valid knowledge, that gives prama. So now let us move on to, after understanding the Prama, Pramana. Now let us move on to what is Shabda Pramana. As I move forward, you will know that why I am speaking up all these philosophical lectures. I mean, some of you may have attended it, thinking that I may be speaking about the verses of Manusmriti, but I am sorry to disappoint. I will not be touching upon it. I will be speaking about what is, as I said, what is the function and role of Dharma Shastra, which Smritis are Dharma Shastra. So we need to understand what is Shastra, right? What is the role of Shastra? So the role of Shastra is here, Shabda Pramana. What is Shastra after all? It is a treatise. It is a book. It is a text. It is a basically a collection of words and sentences. So that is what Shabda Pramana is. Shabda literally means verbal knowledge. Shabda Pramana means Shabda which acts as a Pramana, verbal knowledge, that is verbal or words or sentences from which knowledge about objects can be gained. That object could be anything from our perceptible objects or imperceptible objects. However, not all verbal knowledge are valid. That is, whatever written anywhere in the world, it is not Prama, it is not valid knowledge. We, in a transactional example, I can say, we routinely find mistakes in textbooks of physics or maths, right? So it is not that everything is always correct. Whatever is written or whatever is spoken. See, Shabda is not only the written, it is also spoken. It is primarily spoken, right? So all verbal knowledge is not valid. The Nyaya Darshana defines Shabda Pramana or Shabda as valid verbal knowledge. Not all verbal knowledge are Shabda Pramana, only valid verbal knowledge are Shabda Pramana. How does Nyaya then define this valid verbal knowledge? It defines Shabda as Apta Upadeshaha Shabdaha. Shabda is that which constitutes the Upadesha, assertions, teachings, instructions, Upadesha of the Apta. Apta means a trustworthy person. In Sanskrit, a trustworthy authority, a trustworthy person is called as Apta. And this Apta is defined as one who knows the truth, he speaks the truth, and who is willing to speak truth, to share the knowledge about a particular, true knowledge about a particular topic with a competent person for the guidance of that person. So Apta is one who knows the truth, who speaks the truth, and who shares this truth for the benefit of the another person, for as a guidance to the another person. So the Prama, but however, need to understand here, the Prama or knowledge is not just in the perception of the words or the sentences. It actually lies in the understanding, a correct understanding of the correct meaning of the statements of Apta and Apta. So there is an objective aspect and a subjective aspect. The objective aspect is in the form of words and sentences. The subjective aspect is in correct understanding by the recipient of what is received. Therefore, the Shabda Pramana is a source of knowledge which is in the form of words and sentences of a trustworthy person, of an Apta, and it gives rise to correct knowledge or Prama when the meaning of those verbal testimony, when the meaning of those words and sentences or propositions are correctly grasped. So correctly grasped is as important as grasping the words and seeing the words or hearing the words and sentences. Correctly understanding is also the key. So we now understood a basic definition of what is valid knowledge, what are the elements of involved in knowledge, pramata, prameya, pramana, prama, and what is prama, valid knowledge. what is pramana or the means to understand knowledge, the kind of different types of pramana, and that we just understood the definition of Shabda Pramana. Now, Nyaya Darshana classifies this Shabda Pramana in two different ways. In one classification, it classifies it into Vaidika and Laukika. Vaidika means the knowledge which is derived from the words of the Veda, from the Veda, the knowledge revealed by the Veda, the knowledge which is generated by understanding the meaning of the Veda. Laukika refers to knowledge about worldly issues, that are revealed from, say, the knowledge about physics or mathematics that we get when we read the textbook of mathematics or physics. That is an example of Laukika Shabda Pramana, right? And the another closely related but a distinct way of, different way of divisioning, different way of classification of Shabda Pramanas into Drishtartha and Adrishtartha, and this is significant. Drishtartha refers to knowledge regarding perceptible objects. For example, a friend of mine goes to Himalayas, he climbs Everest mountain, and then he comes back to me and describes his experience, describes what he saw at the place, where all places he went, how was it, etc. See, that knowledge that I am gaining from his account about this Mount Everest or Himalayas is drishtartha. This is of a perceptible object. I can also go there and perceive it. This is something which is available to perceive by our eyes, ears, etc. It can be verified or falsified by empirical means. So anybody else, somebody who has gone there can actually verify whether what this guy is saying is correct or not, or falsify it as well. The other part is adrishtartha. It refers to knowledge about imperceptible objects. For example, I told you just now, I gave an example about how different ways a person can pass an exam or fail an exam. And I mentioned about punya and papa. So this concept of punya and papa, dharmic merit, and karmic demerit, which gives us karma phala in the form of sukha and dukkha. These are imperceptible. You cannot perceive punya with our eyes, with our logic, with the comparison. None of the other pramanas. We mentioned about pratyaksha, that is perception, anumana or inference, the analogy, and non-anupalabdhi. None of this, or even arthapatti, postulation. See, none of these pramanas can actually either prove or disprove, either verify or falsify about the existence of punya and papa. Similarly, the Veda speaks about different yagyas. It speaks about certain yagyas which when performed, the result of the yagya is such that the performer will attain svarga upon death. Now, this Swarga, or in the Puranic language, the various lokas, Devaloka, Pitruloka, all these places, there is no way that we can perceive it using our senses, sensory organs. There is no way that we can perceive it using the other pramanas like Pratyaksha, Anumana, etc. So these are imperceptible objects, and Adrishtartha is the knowledge of these imperceptible objects, and this knowledge is gained by Veda, primarily by Veda, and secondarily by other Shastras as well, and we will come to that shortly. Coming to Veda, because Veda is posited as the ultimate Shastra Pramana, ultimate Shabda Pramana. The subject of Veda is twofold. Dharma and Brahma. The first, the Purva Bhaga of Veda, the the Samhita, Brahmana, Aranyaka are all concerned with Dharma. The Uttara Bhaga and the Upanishad concerned with Brahma, the Parabrahma Swarupa, the ultimate knowledge, ultimate reality. And this Veda, Nyaya Darshana, there are difference of opinion between different darshanas about the Veda. The Nyaya Darshana says that Veda is Paurusheya. It is authored by Ishvara himself. Nyaya Darshana says that Veda is a Shabda Pramana, it is a Apta Vakya. Because, and it is a trustworthy source because it is authored by Ishvara himself. Ishvara being omniscient person, Sarvavyapi Sarvagnaha, is omniscient. The Veda authored by him, Veda given by him, manifested by him, is without faults, without lacuna, without any kind of problems, without any kind of fallacy. So, Veda is a valid Shabda Pramana. It leads to Pramar, true knowledge, because it is authored by Ishvara, who is the highest Apta possible. The humans can make mistake, even the greatest of rishis can make mistake, but Ishvara cannot make mistake. On the other hand, Sankhya, Mimamsa and Vedanta, especially Mimamsa and Vedanta, consider Veda as apaurisheya or impersonal. They do not, they say that the Ishvara does not create, does not author the Veda. Ishvara manifests the eternally existing Veda in the beginning of each cycle of the year. So it is apaurisheya, it is impersonal, not authored by any being, human or divine, and hence it is without fault, without lacuna, and hence it is Swata Pramana. This aspect I already mentioned. See, a note about apaurisheya is needed here. The Hindu understanding of Veda, as we shall see shortly, is not only limited to the mantras that is available to us today. We have lost large number of branches, but even that we believe that Veda is infinite, the sum total of all knowledge. So it is not just the whatever branches, whatever is available to us. But more importantly, when it is said it is apaurisheya, it is not denying that the rishis were the mediums through whom the Veda was revealed. The rishis were mantradrashta, and these rishis put the Vedas into the verbal format that is available to us today. It may be in the form of a praise for a deity, it may be in the form of a ritual instruction, whatever it is. But the knowledge that came to the rishi is eternal. It is not a creation, new creation out of the whims and fancies of the rishi. Anyways, that's a different debate. I will not go into it here. It's not relevant. Mimamsa divides Shabda Pramana into two divisions, that is Paurishaya and Apaurishaya. Paurishaya consists in the words of a trustworthy person. Apaurishaya consists of words of a Veda. So there is Paurishaya Shabda Pramana and Apaurishaya Shabda Pramana, right? Both are Shabda Pramanas. So while for Nyaya, and another difference is for Nyaya, the Prama happens, the rise of proper knowledge happens from the grasping of words, Padagyana. For the Mimamsa and Vedanta, it is Vakya Jnana. The knowledge arises by the grasping of sentences and propositions. And Vedanta especially sees that Prama as a knowledge that is not contradicted by any other sources. Therefore, as I said, what the Veda reveals about Dharma and Brahma, it cannot be understood. It is supersensible. It is Adrishtartha. It is cannot be either verified or falsified by empirical means by any of the other pramanas. Therefore, it is Swata Pramana. It is valid by its own. It does not need any other reasons to be valid. All the Astika Darshanas agrees that Veda is the ultimate Shabda Pramana, which is perfect, infallible, and provides valid knowledge for Prama on all points. Now, with this, we come to the next segment after we see how Veda is understood as a Aptavakya, ultimate Aptavakya in the Nyaya Darshana, as a Apaurishaya Veda in the Mimamsa and Vedanta Darshana, and hence they are absolutely valid. They give absolutely valid Prama on all counts. We also see that when it comes to the issue of Dharma, I said the Purva Bhaga of Veda is about Dharma, right? We see from texts like Manusmriti and Yagyavalkya Smriti that while Veda is the ultimate pramana for Dharma, there are other valid pramanas which as well, like Smritis, Achara or the practice and conduct of rishis and other high-souled people, Atmatushti, our personal satisfaction, our conscience, which is based on Shruti and Smriti, Puranas, Nyaya, Mimamsa, so on and so forth. So there is a centuries of debate in the Mimamsa and Nyaya tradition regarding whether the texts like Smritis are valid pramana for understanding Dharma or not. Well, Veda's status as the ultimate Shabda Pramana was established using the arguments of Apaurishayatva and as ultimate Apta Vachana, depending upon Mimamsa or Nyaya. The Smritis were also established as valid Shabda Pramana, broadly based on two grounds. One, that the teachings of the rishis like Manu, Yagyavalkya, etc. are valid because these rishis are aptas. They are trustworthy people. Then second, that these teachings are based on Veda and hence they are valid because Veda being Apaurishaya is always valid. Now, Nyaya and Mimamsa Darshana. See, Nyaya position is basically related to Apta position and Mimamsa with the dependency on Veda position. So these darshanas provide extensive arguments to prove the authenticity and validity of Smritis as Shabda Pramana. Nyaya Darshana argues that Smritis are valid because they have been revealed by Aptas or trustworthy people like Manu, Yagyavalkya, etc. So the question is, how do they prove this trustworthiness? What is the basis of deciding he is trustworthy, he is not trustworthy? So they provide two kinds of arguments. The earlier Nayayikas tried to prove it through agreement. The earlier Nayayikas actually tried to prove it by running a partial test where possible. While the majority of assertions or the prominent or the most important teachings of the Dharma Shastras are related to Dharma about Punya, Papa, Karma, Phala, etc., which are imperceptible, Adrishtartha. There are also certain sections there which are Drishtartha. So they gave examples of these portions and tried to verify it with whether it actually happens on the ground or not. And if it happens, then we can say that other things are also equally valid because a part of it's valid, so other things are also valid. So, and the second kind of argument and the most important kind of argument of trustworthiness is proved by agreement among other exemplary people. Other exemplary people. That is, if other people who are rishis, who are highly knowledgeable people for dharmikas, are holding Manu as in a high status, are holding Yajnavalkya in a high status, and following their prescriptions or praising them, then that is a proof enough, because these rishis are themselves aptas. Mimamsa Darshana, on the other hand, argues that Smritis are valid because they are based on Shruti or Veda, and they prove it in two ways. One, by using Arthapatti or postulation. I already told that Arthapatti is a valid Praman. And there are detailed explanation and elaboration of how this is done. I am not going to that. They basically they showed that by using Arthapatti, that the motive of Manu and Yajnavalkya, etc., behind composition or behind the teaching of what later came to be known as Manu Dharma Shastra or Yajnavalkya Smriti was the basis is Veda itself. Basis, it is not a product of raga dvesha. It's not a product of hatredness or attachment to somebody, attachment to some people, hatredness towards some other people. It is not a product of human whims and fancies or human limitations, but it was basically to share the knowledge of the Veda. And that is why it is called Smriti, recollection. In Mahabharata, after Krishna gives Bhagavad Gita, and later when Arjuna forgets that Gita, he asks again Krishna, he says, I cannot reveal that correctly, but I can recollect it and give you another thing, that is Anugita, and they match on many places. So that is what something similar. It is not same, something similar. There are Veda, and from the knowledge of the Veda, the rishis, for the benefit of the people, gave the Smriti. So by Arthapatti, the Mimamsakas establishes the authoritativeness of the Smriti. Further, they give a second reason that because the Smriti stipulations and practices are also practiced by those who practice Vaidika karmas. That is, the Shrautas who practice Vaidika karmas also practice the Smriti karmas, then it shows that both are equally valid. In fact, the Mimamsa, in certain quarters of Mimamsa, or at least in practice, one of the prevalent view is that it understands Veda as being two kinds. One is Pratyaksha Veda, the other is Anumeya Veda. Veda that is directly perceived. That is the Veda, this refers to the branches or the mantras that is available to us in the existing branches. Anumeya Veda is Vedic instructions which are inferred, which are logically inferred. How is it inferred? Two kinds of inferences. One, the Veda which is inferred based on the existing Veda, the existing Pratyaksha Veda, and the Vedas which are inferred from the existing Smritis. So the Smritis came to be equated with as the Anumeya Veda, came to be enjoyed a status something equivalent, not equal to, not same as Veda, but equivalent to Veda, as a Anumeya Veda, as a text based on Veda, as an instruction based on Veda, revealed by the rishis. Many of the same rishis who are also mentioned in the Vedas themselves, such rishis who had a complete understanding of Veda, therefore the Smritis are rooted in Veda. So this actually we can see, I have taken just an example of Manusmriti. The present text of Manusmriti, the modern scholars say it was composed on 2000 years or something like that. Whatever be the date, it is the final version that is available to us from the redaction of a long tradition of transmission of Manusmriti. I have written a paper on this. It was published on Indic today. Anybody can check. The original text had, the original teaching of Manu had 100,000 verses, and it was redacted again and again, and different recensions have gone in there. And the recension available to us is the Brigu's recension. Even in there, it is the fourth redacted version, a smaller version. But in this redacted version, the memory about the origins of the tradition is maintained, wherein it says, the text claims itself as valid because Manu is an apta. In the very opening four verses, and later in first and second chapter also it is given, it is again and again showed how Manu is apta as a trustworthy source. And why is it a trustworthy source? Because he is the son of Hiranyagarbha, Brahma. He is Swayambhuva Manu, the first Manu. He is not a human being. He is a divine being. He is the originators of all the human species, but he is the first. He is a divine being himself, and he learned this Dharma Shastra from Brahma himself, and he is well versed in Veda. There is a particular verse in second chapter which says that whatever is said in Manu is said in Veda. There is nothing said in Manu which is not in Veda. So these are all the memories of the school of knowledge which were transmitted. That memory, that the knowledge transmitted in that school is by a valid, as an apta, as by a teacher who was well versed in Veda, has been retained. What is interesting is we find a praise for the authority of Manu in many other texts, including Shruti or Veda. Taittiriya Samhita itself says that what Manu says, whatever Manu says, is wholesome, it is complete, like a medicine. You know, sometimes we don't like the taste of the medicines. Sometimes we don't want to take the medicine, but medicines are beneficial to us. So Manu's teachings are like that. We may not like some of it. We may not find a resonance with some teachings. We may find some of its portions as problematic, but as a whole, if you take the text, there is something for everyone there. There is some medicine for everyone there. There is something useful for everyone there. And Mahabharata, the same text also says that we are all children of Manu. Mahabharata speaks about how Manu is the original promulgator of Dharma, and how later teachers like Ushanas and Brahaspati composed their works based on the work of Manu. Similarly, Yajnavalkya Smriti is a prominent one, and this Yajnavalkya is a prominent rishi in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So, in this memory that is retained about the origination and transmission of Smriti texts within the tradition, within the texts themselves, shows it fulfills all the criteria which later was argued by Nyaya and Mimamsa schools about Apta Vakya, trustworthy person. It's a trustworthy Shabda Pramana, Apta Shabda Pramana, as being based on Veda, being based on the Apurusha Veda, and it is something that is practiced by those who practice Shautas. It is something that is praised by all the others who are Dharmikas. Like Manu is praised by Shruti itself, praised by Mahabharata and other places. Now, this is an important subject, and this a lot of noise is made of this. Today, whenever there is some problematic or what is apparently problematic verse in any of the Dharma Shastras or Smriti, a claim is made, saying that Smriti does not matter. Because we take only Veda as Pramana, and wherever a conflict between Smriti and Shruti is there, Smriti is rejected. See, that is theoretically true, but the way the narrative is today is that this is a convenient argument, it's convenient excuse used to discredit Smriti. It is something, it is an easy way that Hindu society is taking to discredit and denounce their own Shastras simply because some detractors of Hinduism are posing some questions based on their incorrect or improper or inconvenient reading. And the situation is such that it appears as if the whole of the Smritis are not needed at all. There is nothing good in them, that is nothing useful in them, and it is something which has no value to it. Because whatever it is there, it is simply some in the words of Swami Vivekananda, a product of limited minds, But it is not so. Jayanta Bhatta, who was a very renowned Nayayika from 9th or 10th centuries, he was not only, though a renowned Nayayika means one who is practitioner of Nyaya Darshana. He also had deep knowledge in other darshanas, especially Mimamsa. So in his book Nyaya Manjari, he notes at one of the chapter, which is related to this topic on Shruti and Smriti, he says, the so-called contradictions between Shruti and Smriti are minimal. They are hardly found. They are very, compared to the vast issues discussed in Shruti and Smriti, the contradictions per se, the real contradictions, are very minimal. So if he suggests that if in case we perceive there are contradictions on first reading, there are three ways to resolve them. And these are not something he makes up actually. These are the end results of centuries of debate within the Mimamsa and Nyaya and in between these darshanas. The three solutions given are proposed by different scholars at different times in Mimamsa and Nyaya as well. First is, of course, that Veda overcomes the Smritis that we all know, we have all heard so many times. The second is that they can be actually alternate paths. One can opt for any of them. Both of them will give the same benefit. It is up to an individual to opt for which alternate. And third, there are no real contradictions since the seemingly contradictory prescriptions are in fact applied to different types or groups of people. And most of all those things that we today consider as contradictions belong to the third group. An example is Medatithi quoting Veda. Veda in one place says that one should not commit suicide. One should not end one's life before the normal way it ends. Now, Smritis and other traditions allow for one to voluntarily end life in certain conditions. Like we have the practice of prayo pravesha, which one voluntarily takes at the end as the life nears an end or something like that. Now, people can see apparently it appears as if the Shruti is prohibiting such a voluntary end to life, but the Smriti is allowing voluntary end to life. But this is actually not a real contradiction. The prohibition in the Shruti is a general prohibition, it's a generic prohibition. The Smriti, the allowance in Smriti is a exception to the general prohibition. The context of the Smriti is a specific instance. The context of the Shruti is a general or a generic instruction. Right? So we need to see what kind of context is there. It is only when we can be assured that what the Smriti and the Shruti prescribes both are speaking about either a specific thing or either a generic thing in the same context, and they are not alternatives. Only when we establish then we can say for sure that they are indeed contradictory, and in such cases, Vedas overrides the Smriti. So most of the so-called contradictions are not contradictions at all. They are either alternatives or they apply to different contexts. So in all such cases, what then it means? It means that Smritis are valid pramana for knowing dharma, for knowing actions. In Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says that to know what is karya and akarya, what ought to be done, what is not to be done, that is what is dharma and what is adharma, shastras are the pramana. And all the commentators like Ramanuja, Madhusudana Saraswati all mention that Veda, Smriti, Itihasa, Purana, these are all the shastras that are pramanas. So, with all this long discussion, all this long talk, what I am leading to is this, that function of Smritis in Hindu tradition, irrespective of what modern scholars say, but within the tradition, because as a practicing Hindu, what should ultimately matter is what our drishti is, not what the modern drishti is. So the function of Smriti is only this, and primarily this, that it is a Pramana Shastra. It is a treatise, it is a Shastra that reveals true knowledge, valid knowledge about Dharma. A knowledge which cannot be known from any other Pramanas like Pratyaksha, Anumana, etc. True Smritis are based on Veda, but as I said, the role of Smriti is not just subordinatory as it made out to be. The Smritis have a status of a Anumeya Veda, from which Veda can be inferred. Non-perceivable Veda, which are lost to us, can be inferred, whose existence can be inferred. So Smritis are Pramana Shastras that give to us, impart to us correct knowledge or prama about dharma, about what actions gives us benefit, sukha and punya, what actions leads to more dukkha, leads to papa. And this is something cannot be known from other pramanas at all. Let me give you two examples that Kulluka Bhatta, one of the commentators on Manusmriti or Manu Dharma Shastra, gives. Take the example of kama or sexual intercourse. Everybody indulges in it. Every householder indulges in it, right? But only Smriti can reveal, only Smriti reveals, the Manu and other Smritis have a section on this. What context the sexual intercourse will lead to is dharmic and will lead to punya, and in what context such as sexual intercourse is adharmic and it leads to papa. For example, having sexual intercourse with your own spouse is punya. Not having it with your own spouse is not punya, is not dharma. It's actually failure to do dharma. However, adultery or having sexual intercourse with someone else's spouse is adharma. This knowledge cannot be known from any other source. See, it is not just the question of ethics. I'm telling you. The example of exams that I gave, a person who passes the exam by study of hard work, he not only passes the exam, but he also gains punyam or dharmic merit because of the hard work he puts. But one who passes the exam by cheating, though he passes the exam, he also accrues, he also gets papam or dharmic demerit, which he will have to face the karma phala in future. Similarly, in this case, sexual intercourse, which is dharmic, performance of it gives punya along with the whatever satisfaction at the physical level. Similarly, with the adharmic sexual intercourse, in case of adultery, etc., it gives dharmic demerit, which comes back to us as karma phala in the form of dukkha. Second example is, while everyone practices one or the other jobs to earn livelihood, maintains families, we don't need to be told by any text that I have to work to earn money and have a good life, right? But it is only the Dharma Shastra which reveal about what kind of livelihood options are both materially and spiritually benefit for which group of people. For example, that materially spiritually benefit means Abhyudaya Nishrayasa that I spoke before. For example, Manusmriti says that for a Kshatriya, Rakshana of a people, the protection of the people is his highest duty. See, he may earn money by taxing the people, he may earn livelihood, fine. But his duty, basic duty from which he earns punyam, is the rakshana of the people. Right? So this knowledge is revealed only by Dharma Shastra. You can't read it in physics or maths textbook. You cannot know it by pratyaksha, by direct perception. You cannot know it by inference. You can know it by any other source of any other pramanas in isolation. Shastra alone are pramana. This knowledge is revealed by Dharma Shastras, by the Smritis. So, as Pramana Shastra, the Smritis are concerned only with revealing knowledge about Dharma, especially about connection between karma and karma phala. This is the primary purpose and their important purpose. See, you will know it. The Smritikaras knows this. The commentators knows this. How do we know that they know? Take the very opening four verses of Manu Dharma Shastra. There, or even in Yajnavalkya or Parashara Smritis, everywhere, how does it start? It starts by a group of rishis or a group of people approaching these very learned sages, learned rishis, with a request to reveal knowledge about Dharma. Whether this was a historical event or not is not the issue. It need not be historical event at all. But through this narrative aspect, what the text is revealing is that its self-awareness about its purpose. That the students are approaching the teacher with a request for knowledge. And then the teacher, seeing the students are competent, seeing that the students are humble, seeing that the students do not have any wrong motives, he then agrees to share that knowledge with the student. The primary purpose then is revealing knowledge about dharma, about adharma, about karya, akarya, about karma and karma phala. So from this we can know that texts like Manusmriti are not law books. They are not constitutional texts. They were never literally and hegemonically imposed upon society by a secular government, so to speak, in toto. In line by line, word by word, there was no secular imposition. They are not book of commandments in a biblical sense as well, which was hegemonically imposed by a religious authority like a church. The content of the Dharma Shastra, that does not mean that Dharma Shastras was irrelevant. It was merely an obsession of some group of wily Brahmanas, right? It has a relevance, it had a relevance, it will have a relevance. What is that? The content of the Dharma Shastra is broadly divided into three subjects: Achara or practice, Vyavahara or jurisprudence, prayashchitta or expiation. The presence of achara and prayashchitta as part of Dharma Shastra shows that it is not a law book in a strict sense of the word. It is not a constitution. However, it does not mean that they were not used in legal issues. In fact, they were used. Dharma Shastras as a whole and not as a single text, not one text of Manusmriti, but Dharma Shastra as a whole formed the ethical and theoretical basis of law. They provided the basic legal principles, legal frameworks, the basic worldview, the ethical principles on which laws were created, legal disputes were resolved, a kind of order was maintained in the society. A good example for this is on the question of inheritance in the pre-colonial India. The question of inheritance, India largely followed two different schools of legal stipulations on the question of inheritance. One was Mitakshara, which was written by Vijnaneshwara. The other is Dayabhaga, which was written by G. Mutavahana. We must note that Mitakshara is a commentary on Yajnavalkya Smriti and Dayabhaga is an independent work. And in both these works, the reputed authors, they do not consider just one Smriti or other Smritis, just one Smriti. Though Vijnaneshwara's work is a commentary on Yajnavalkya Smriti, he considers the opinion of the entire Dharmashastra, entire spectrum, entire genre of Dharmashastra, from the Veda to the Smritis to other texts. Similarly with Jumutavahana, that is how the tradition has worked. That is how the digest, the medieval digest like Nirnaya Sindhu and Dharma Sindhu and all this Veeramitrodaya of Veeramitrodaya's work, that is the name of the author, Veeramitrodaya. All these works were created. They examined the entirety of Dharma Shastras. They considered it as a Shabda Pramana and derived principles and try to deal with the issues as and when they arise. When I say that Dharma Shastras were not imposed in a biblical sense with respect to practices and morals of people, it again does not mean that Dharma Shastra is irrelevant to our moral life, our ethical life, our social issues, or cultural life, or religious life. Dharma Shastra formed the ethical, socio-cultural, religious backbone of the society. They provided the material, the knowledge, the tools to negotiate with reality and handle challenging issues. An example of how Dharma Shastra formed the backbone of society with respect to socio-cultural ethical issues can be found in the times of Marathas. Deepamba was the wife of Ekoji, the half-brother of Shivaji, and the Ekoji was the founder of Maratha Empire in Tanjore. And Deepamba was an important wife, very influential wife of Ekoji. She commissioned Raghunatha Pandita to compose texts detailing Sri Dharma. And he mentions this in introduction to one of his texts. Deepamba wanted this text to be composed to provide guidance to Hindu women because she felt that under the Mohammedan influence, under the Islamic influence, Hindu married women especially have strayed away from Dharma. So this was the purpose. This was how the Dharma Shastra functioned in society. The teachings of the Dharma Shastras then percolated to popular culture, popular literature, popular songs through multiple methods. What are of the Itihasa Purana genre themselves are biggest examples for this. What is stated, to quote one of the Swami Gnanananda Bharati, he is no longer there. In his book on Ramayana, I think it's titled is Rambles in Ramayana, he says that while, if I remember correctly, he says that while in the Smritis and Dharma Shastras, the teachings of Dharma is given in the sense like a father teaches his children. But in Ramayana, the same teachings are reformulated and given in a language of how a friend advises his friend. The teachings are the same, but the language of communication is different. And this, and you read the Ramayana, you see this same thing. And this Ramayana and Mahabharata were recreated again and again in literary format in different languages, in Kannada, Telugu, Tamil, in Hindi and other languages. And they were also performed in plays, through drama, songs, so many things. So these knowledge of the Smritis, of the Shruti, they percolated. That is why the Mahabharata Vyasa says that this is Sri Shutra Veda, right? The Vedic knowledge was made available for everyone, even those who did not have the competency to understand, to approach, to or even time or even need to spend decades studying Veda, right? It takes 48 years to properly master all the four Vedas, properly in a complete sense, right? So, this is how the Smritis function. This is the role of Smriti. This answers the question, you know, just because people do not have Manusmriti at home and they have Bhagavad Gita at home, it doesn't mean that Manusmriti or other Smritis are not relevant to Hindu identity or Hindu civilization or Hindu Dharma. They are not central. Only Bhagavad Gita is some kind of Bible of Hindu Dharma. It is not like. In fact, the fact is, even 100 years back, I don't think every home had a copy of even Gita. It is thanks to saints like Swami Chinmayananda who started the Gita Yagya movement all over India that today we all have Gita. See, in a pre-colonial India, the way society functions was completely different. Each community transmitted the knowledge that they have received from their elders. And lot of knowledge was transmitted from Guru Shishyas by traveling monks, traveling saints who traveled from one city to another city, one village to another village. That is how the knowledge was transmitted in a very decentralized format. So the Dharma Shastras, in short, constitutes the knowledge bank of Hindu society that provided and provides even now theoretical frameworks like Purusharthas, like Varnashrama Dharma, Apad Dharma, Prayashchitta, Rajadharma, Vyavahara, so many things. These principles were derived and interpreted by the Dharmashastra traditions, by the Acharyas of Dharmashastra traditions, to the needs of the society and guided the society and acted as socio-religious, cultural, and legal backbone of the society. The tenets of Dharma in the form of Vidhi and Nisheda, enunciated by Manu and other smritis, are generic and broad guidelines. Though they are not binding in a biblical sense. However, they are binding in one sense and one sense alone. And that is that if a particular karma is performed, the phala of that karma, one has to experience it invariably. So that a particular karma or action gives rise to a particular kind of result. And that particular result could be favorable leading to sukha or happiness or unfavorable leading to dukkha or sorrow based on whether it was dharma or adharma. It is in this sense that the smritis are binding. That is, it reveals this knowledge about karma and karma phala. It is for this reason Bhagavan Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says, as I mentioned earlier, that Shastras are the means to understand what actions are to be performed and what actions are to be avoided. Knowing thus the guidelines of Shastras, one must perform actions in the world. However, a caveat, and it is a repetition, but it needs to be added, is that the role of the text itself is limited to imparting this knowledge about actions and the results of those actions for the benefit of mankind. As I said, when the students approached the master revealed the knowledge about dharma. The master was not standing with a stick or a sword and asking everybody to follow it with the pain of death if not followed. This implies that Smritis reveal first principles of Dharma which are eternal and which will always remain valid no matter what socio-political changes occur in society. That the latter, that is socio-political changes, only influence the different application of Dharma in practice and not the first principles of Dharma itself. In the Smritis itself, when you start seriously reading them, you will see that only certain verses are in the form of vidhis or injunctions. Many are only in the form of advice or opinion. And yet other, many are in the form of observations or descriptions. From this, we can see that we can deduce, infer the first principles. Some first principles are directly given. Some first principles can be inferred from whatever practical advices are given. Many of the practical advices may not be implementable today. Some may not be, because of the passage of time and context may not be relevant today, the practical aspect. But the first principles, like if the Smriti says that ahimsa, satyam, asteyam, shaucham, indriya, nagram, these are the primary dharmas that are applicable to all people. Suddenly, today, we cannot say that no, himsa and asatya and non-indriya nigraha, steya, etc. have become dharma. We cannot say that untruthfulness and stealing has become dharma because the time has changed. No. The ethical principles, the eternal principles, the first principles about the relationship between karma and karma phala are eternal and will always remain valid. We need to just understand how we can contextualize those teachings, interpret those teachings to our needs today, to negotiate with the problems that we have today. Problem, it may be the issue of marriage, issue of abortion, issue of social unrest, issue of so many things, issue of ecology, whatever it may be. So whether one chooses to follow Dharma Shastras or not, or how much one is able to follow or one wants to follow Dharma Shastra, or how would one interpret and contextualize the teachings of Dharma Shastra to one's situation is ultimately dependent upon one's own discretion and exertion of free will, and whether we approach them for knowledge or for caricaturing them or abusing them is up to us. It is entirely up to an individual. The texts themselves stand tall and unaffected by all these activities as Pramana Shastra. None of this abuse or caricaturing or blind following are going to affect Pramana Shastra. Affect the status of Dharma Shastra as a Pramana Shastra, that which reveals Prama, true knowledge about Dharma. So, it is in our benefit, therefore, that we approach the Shastra with Shraddha, as Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, Shraddhavan Labate Jnanam, so that we engage with the text in a serious manner, understand the text, gain whatever is useful for us, and implement them so as to attain Abhyudaya and Nishreyasa. If we find something problematic, something that we find impossible today, or something we do not agree with, fine. You do not need to follow it, but you do not need to abuse it as well. It is very much possible that you are not able to appreciate it because of, or you are not able to understand it. Appreciation is far away. You are not able to understand it because of prevalent prejudices and biases, or because of prevalent worldview of modernity, whose values have completely changed from the dharmic values that the Shastras, that the Hindu tradition promotes, right? It is okay, but you can always take what is good from it and practice it. The gist of Hindu Dharma is, you know, let all the good thoughts come from all the directions, right? Why are we denouncing our Shastras then? The, the very Shastras that our ancestors, our rishis, imparted to us for the sake of us, for the to help us to navigate through this difficult samsara, navigate through this very complicated Kali Yuga. And this is my final words. Today we are living in a very challenging times wherein Hindu identity and what it means to be Hindu is facing immense attacks from within and without. Because of the colonial dismantling of Hindu education institutions and long-term foreign occupation, we have become deracinated from our roots. Faster and faster technological developments, as well as narrative war that is being waged against Hindu civilization in the fields of education, politics, social issues, cultural, religious issues, etc., are serious challenge today. We have to ask ourselves what it means to be a Hindu. What is the source of Hindu identity? If we have to transmit Hinduism to our youngsters, what it means to be a Hindu. Currently, we are blindly imitating the West and adopting their discourses, copy pasting their frameworks to our own society, and we are trying to approach all issues from a foreign framework, from a foreign drishti, to borrow Raja Malhotraji's words. And still, we are calling ourselves Hindu. Take up any issue, take up the issue of proper age for marriage, take up the issues of abortion, take up the issue of gender equality, take up any issue. The very term gender equality is, for example, is borrowed from the West. Where is our drishti? Where are our frameworks? Our frameworks, as far as socio-cultural, religious issues are concerned, can be only derived from Dharma Shastra tradition, because it is the field of scope of study of Dharma Shastra. It is the field of study of Dharma Shastra. It is not the field of study of Bhagavad Gita per se. The Bhagavad Gita, yes, gives frameworks like the Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, which is very relevant. But when it comes to socio-cultural issues, that is not enough. We need to dig into Dharma Shastra. So the only solution to this is to revive Hindu knowledge traditions, institutions and discourses, especially in important areas like Dharma Shastra. The Vidyasthana of Dharma Shastra forms the backbone, socio-cultural backbone of Hindu civilization. Without it, we will be a valueless society, and importantly, we will not be able to negotiate with rising issues like adultery, abortion, domestic violence, whatever it is, by an Indic perspective. We will be stuck with alien frameworks which are unsuitable to our society, which creates more problems than solving them. So, a correct understanding of Smritis and their function in society, followed by revival of study, discussion, interpretive tradition of Dharma Shastras, will go a long way in its resurgence of the Hindu civilization. And I hope I have been successful, at least to some extent, to convey the importance of this, to convey the function of Dharma Shastra, to convey the role of Smritis. And I hope at least some of you have benefited with it.
was a most enlightening talk. Thank you so much, sir. I'm so a lot of what's in my head has been clarified. I am from the diaspora, so my question was two-part. Are Ved and Shastra two separate categories? We are accustomed hearing Shastra refers to commentaries made by humans, while Ved is Aparashya. But many people combine the two, they conflate both, and they say Shastra and meaning Ved. I'd like you to clarify that. And the second, how do we continue our Dharma tradition outside of India, especially in this indentured Indian diaspora where we don't have the experts as you have in India? It's very troubling to interpret, as you were saying. We end up with the Western paradigm, abortion, women's rights, and so on. We end up thinking like that. How do we approach this? Thank you, Ji.
Thank you, Indraniji. I'm glad you liked the session. The first question, quickly, basically, yes. See, all the texts, this is how we are a living tradition and not a fossilized dead tradition. So it is not that there was some text composed or revealed at some point in history and afterwards everything is out of picture, right? So the commentary tradition is how the tradition is kept alive, how the texts are made relevant to our times. So yes, we have Veda, which the tradition considers as Apaurishaya. The Mimamsa and Vedanta schools considers as Apaurishaya. And we have the commentaries of important of them being Sayanacharya's commentaries on this Veda to understand what Veda is. And we also have Vedangas like Nirukta, etc. So yes, when we speak about Shastra, we speak about the whole tradition and not an individual text. See, though for a modern scholar or modern scholarship, the historicity of transmission is relevant. That which text came first, which commentator was early in history. Yes, there is value in that scholarship. I am not denying that there is no value in it. Sometimes it is good to know that how a meaning of a term has changed over times. But however, from a dharmika perspective, from a practitioner's perspective, what is relevant to us is not just one text in history, but the entirety of tradition, down to what text which are down to the texts which are being composed today, now, here and now. So that is why you see the even though Bhagavad Gita is many centuries or many millennia old, even the modern commentaries like by Swami Chinmayananda or Swami or Sri Aurobindo are as considered important as the actual text, as well as the commentaries of Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, etc., the great acharyas who lived 1,000 years back. So because we take the entirety of tradition into account, and that is what matters for a practical Hindu. That is why you see that a commentator, for example, be Medaditi on Manusmriti or a Shankaracharya on the Upanishads, he not only sticks to explaining that particular text, he brings in references from many other texts. He brings in references from other teachers of the tradition. He brings in references, he quotes his opponents as well. So this is how the Vada tradition in Hindu Dharma has proceeded, and there is a wonderful Vada book by book on Vada by Radhanath Tripathi. I hope I spelled the name of the author correctly. Second question is more important. Today, because of the technology, we have immense opportunity that even those who are outside of India can connect with their mother roots in India, right? And I must appreciate and congratulate you and others in places like Trinidad who have maintained the Hindu Dharma and who have maintained it as a living tradition despite immense pressures, uh, immense problems that you had, oppression you had to face there. there are two things. One is the Samanya Dharma, the ethical aspect of Hindu Dharma, is always applicable to everyone, and that is something that everybody can practice everywhere. And then, if I am not wrong, you have maintained the Ramayana tradition of especially Tulsidas Ramacharitmanas. You still practice there, you still perform it there. This is a very beautiful example of how you have maintained dharma. See, Rama is described of the Vigrahavan Dharma, Rama Vigrahavan Dharma, embodiment of Dharma. So you understand Rama, you follow Ramayana, you study Mahabharata. So these are the ways you can re-educate oneself with the Dharma and such issues. And now we have this important technology wherein you can arrange events such as this to talk to the people there, and such things are very much possible. And if you're interested on the issue of abortion and menstruation, on menstruation, I have written a book titled Menstruation Across Cultures, a Historical Perspective, wherein the main important chapter is on Hindu Dharma and how it is understands menstruation. I've written a series of articles. You can find it on India Facts about abortion, titled Abortion, a Dharmic Perspective. It's a 4-part article. You might find it interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Namaste, sir. I I actually was attending this session to see if there are some verses from Manusmriti, but you did not disappoint me by all of these things because I learned a lot more. And I recently saw a WhatsApp status from one and from a very elder person, a teacher of mine. And she had this on 25th of December. And it was like, this was a Yagna Kunda. And there was Manusmriti, which was thrown over there by Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And just besides it, there was a woman, this is the Hatkadi, and it is happening. She's full of blood. So the visual itself is so disturbing and all of that. And she's saying that under that status, it was written that celebrating throwing that Manusmriti and burning it. That is what. So I don't understand from where this comes, because I know she hasn't read it, nor have I. So I cannot comment on that. So I wanted your comment on it.
See, the issue happens is, there are many verses that have been cherry picked from the translations of Manusmriti. Okay. So translations are per se not bad, but the point is it many times misses the nuances. And that is where the problems happen. And secondly, our society, we are a post-colonial society, and our values and our worldviews are heavily influenced by West, heavily influenced by our colonial learning. So when we read these translations without any deeper engagement with the text, without the help of the commentaries, or sometimes even with the help of commentaries without any reflection, we find many things that we find today as problematic, or at least today as offensive to some people. An example I quoted, and I think this is relevant, I will quote it again. So there is a verse in Manusmriti which says, Pita tu rakshati kaumari, and the last line basically says, Nastri swatantram arhati. Basically, the verse says that in the young age, the girl must be protected by the father. After marriage, the girl must be protected by the husband. When she grows old, the woman must be protected by the son. Nastri swatantram arhati. Women do not have a right for independence. Now, this is the translation. You check any book, this is the translation you will find. Swatantra term has been translated as independence. And today, we interpret independence in terms of economic independence, in terms of independence for freedom of thought and expression, and freedom to say, right? That is how we interpret it. We interpret independence in terms of empowerment. But the term in the verse actually does not, the Swatantra term has no reference to all these connotations and meanings that we today understand by the term independence. If you read the commentators, they make a repeated reference to the fact that Swatantra there means non-protectedness. The first line speaks about protection, the second line speaks about women should not be left unprotected. Basically, it is a advice to the men folk that please protect your women folk. Please protect your mothers, sisters, and wives and children. Please protect them, facilitate them, create this environment in such a society such that they are not harassed, such that they are not led astray from dharma. Ensure that they also follow the path of dharma. You see the difference here. There is one translation. There is the other aspect, which is understanding, and this understanding has to be seen in a many different contexts. Now, even if I were to take the verse as independence itself, even then, the context is independence from what is the question. It is not an independence from, it is not a prevention of independence from, artha or kama. It is not stopping women from pursuing what they like or what they want to work or economic independence or nothing like that. Actually, there is a term in Sanskrit called svairini. It refers to independent women, translation is, but it refers to women who leave their husbands and live with their boyfriends. Basically, that is what svairini means. That is those who, because of desire, their sexual desire and etc., and not out of other genuine reasons like the husband is bad husband or this was a domestic abuse marriage or something like that, not like that, but because of purely desire, they chose to break the bond of marriage, the dharma that was part of the marriage, and live independently. So the independence here being referred is with respect to dharma, especially the grihastha-ashrama dharma. The grihastha-ashrama dharma is the bond between husband and wife, where husband and wife follow the dharma, artha, kama, moksha, the four purusharthas together. It is called sahadharmachar. The wife is called sahadharmacharini. Somebody you face the difficulties and happiness of the life together. Same to the wife. She faces it with the husband, right? She broke that bond by breaking that bond, that dharma, that duty, and going outside of it is independent. So Nastri Satanta Marathi in the sense that should not be done. That is not beneficial to her. Therefore, it is the duty of the men folk to teach her. It is teach her in the sense, see, we learn from our parents, right? We learn from our father. Do we say that our this relationship of a teacher and student or father and children is a hegemonic relationship? No. So it is a duty of the fathers or the husbands to ensure that to teach her that what are her duties, what is not her duties, and to create an atmosphere such that she can pursue her duties, pursue her desires, everything, dharma, artha, kama, trivargas, in a proper manner without any hindrance, 3, and protect her from any other outside influence. This is the meaning. So there are many other verses like this. So there is one verse which appears in Brahmacharya Ashrama in the 2nd chapter, wherein there are a series of instructions given to Brahmacharya Vatu, male Vatus. I have to clarify this. To male Vatus who go to Gurukula Ashrama, and for them certain instructions are there, wherein it is mentioned that women by nature can even, the nature of women is such that they can even seduce greatest of person, intelligence of beings, even the most learned person. So you should be very cautious. That is what it says. Now people have taken a objection to this because it says the nature of women. It uses the phrase, I don't recall the Sanskrit phrase, but the translation is nature of women. But you need to keep in mind two things. Let us, for theoretical sense, understand it as a nature of women. What it is being says that women have so much power in her sexuality, in her gender, in her biology, that she can actually bring any man to their knees, right? That is the power that the Ganikas used in the past. See, in the past, today, prostitution is a bad word. But in the past, in classical India, we had Ganikas who were running their businesses, who were Ganikas, who were spies. You know, they earned money, they lived independently. They used this beauty, they used this sexual power. So, sexual power, as you will see from Kama Shastra and other texts, is not a bad thing. But coming to the verse itself, it is a instruction to a brahmachari, a male brahmachari, right? So for him, it is being said, look, it is actually it is a peculiar way of saying to him that look, as long as you're in a brahmacharya, that is, earlier years when the hormones run high, you avoid contact with women, because if you go near her, especially women of your age or young, so then you will be naturally attracted to her. This is the nature, how nature is done. The women are attracted to men, men are attracted to. Because the instruction was given to a male brahmachari, it is a way of saying that avoid women. It is their nature. It is like that. So a similar example I can quote from Sri Ramakrishna and Sharadama. He always used the word Kanya Kanchana. Stay away from Kanya and Kanchana. Stay away. Kanya means women, girls, and Kanchana means gold. It looks as if you take it out of context, it looks as if, why is he saying stay away from women alone? What about men, boss? But I read somewhere that Shardama used to give a similar instruction to women devotees, saying that stay away from the men folk, stay away from the Purushas. So you're understanding the point, right? The verse, the recipient, the primary recipient of that the audience, primary audience also matters in how the peculiar way of saying. And Manusmriti has a very peculiar way. Even the language of Dharma Shastra is peculiar. As I study the Dharma Shastra more and more deep, what I've realized is it is not enough that we know Sanskrit. Sanskrit knowing is very needed, but it is not enough that we know Sanskrit to study Dharma Shastra. We need to actually understand the language, phraseology of Dharma Shastra, because it is written in a peculiar format, a format which we find alien, like this example, where the nature of women, that phrase is used as if somehow it appears offensive. I agree. You read a stray verse in some internet website or a meme that is made, the translation of it, it appears offensive. But to understand it properly is a different issue at all. As I said, the Shastras become a pramana. It can give a true knowledge prama only when the meaning is correctly understood. Only reading and quoting will not give that correct knowledge. Right? I hope this answers you to some extent.
One last question we have from one listener is that which is the best translation of Manusmriti that we can read?
No translation is enough. And even sometimes with commentary, it is difficult. And yes, if I have to suggest, I would suggest Manusmriti with Medhathiti's commentary, both of which have been translated into English by Ganganath Jha. It is a 10 or 12 volume book. If you have to buy in hard copy, it will be many volumes of book. but it is also freely available in the internet. You just type it in the internet in Wisdom Library. It's available for free. I extensively refer it. In Hindi, I refer to Manusmriti with Kulluk Patta's commentary, but the commentary has not been translated. But the Hindi verse has been translated by Sri Acharya Kaundinya. He is a scholar from Nepali. He was a scholar. He passed away, I think, a year or two before. Acharya Kaundinya. It is published by Chaukamba Publications. I suggest, and I am happy to share with the audience here that this Vijayadashami, I have finally started writing my own English commentary on Manusmriti, and it will be slow. It will take maybe 3 or 4 decades to complete, if I am able to complete. But it will be coming out. I will be publishing in bits and parts every 2 years or 3 years. And I have just made this beginning on Vijayadashmi. So look for my book in a few years, hopefully.